Welcome to the BMC Keynote with the one and only Sister Bliss from Faithless. How are you today, Bliss?
Hello, I'm really good, thank you. Great to be by the seaside.
Oh yeah, great stuff. We'll talk about the pandemic and the industry in crisis probably, and your new album, All Blessed, and a lot more in a bit. But first, can I ask you, what first got you into DJing in the first place?
Just basically being a slave to acid house. When I first heard the music, I just fell in love with it. Couldn't believe these sounds I was hearing. They were so futuristic and unusual, and became passionate about the scene and discovered pirate radio. And I was also collecting records. A friend of mine was collecting at the same time, and we used to make cassettes together, and all the records she could afford to buy, she'd put on one side, and then I'd put all the records I could afford to buy on the other side. They weren't mixed together, but it was an unmixed mixtape, if you like. And that inspired me to get a pair of decks with my student loan.
So when you started DJing out in clubs and stuff, at what stage did you meet Rollo, who you ended up doing a few tracks with?
I met him, I think it was 91 or 92. I'd started making music myself, and I actually met a friend of his in a record shop, and we made a tune together in my mum's bedroom, and that friend said, "My friend's a producer," which was Rollo. And he brought me down and we played him the tune we'd written in my mum's bedroom, and he agreed to produce it. And it was actually the very first record that came out on Cheeky Records, the fledgling label that he started. So yeah, it was just happenstance, really.
Some of those sorry, slight technical hitch there, but we were talking about Blissy's early days DJing, and when you first met Rollo and went off to do a tune together. How did your sort of working relationship develop from there?
Well, basically, I think I criticised everything he was doing, and he thought, God, who is this person that's just come in and got such a strong opinion on everything? And then I started playing keyboards on various different tracks, and we did do a series of records. The Rollo Goes records was still me and Rollo working together, and then we'd do a couple of records for him, and then some Sister Bliss records for me. And the same friend that I'd met in the record shop then said, I met a Buddhist rapper in South London, in Brixton, and that was Maxi Jazz. And
so how did you guys first come together with Maxi then?
We said, can you ask Maxi if he fancies meeting up and making a tune with us, because we'd made a dance record and we found a button on the Atari that slowed down the Atari to create a hip-hop beat in the middle of it. We thought it'd be really interesting to have a rapper on this section of the music, and Maxi was the person that came to the studio, and we didn't really know much about Buddhism, and we asked him about his faith and his beliefs and his whole philosophy on life, and talked long into the night and said, well, can you put that into a lyric? And he wrote lyrics about a time when he had a lack of faith in himself, and the tagline of the song was just below my skin I'm screaming, and that was the very first Faithless record. It was called Salve Mea, and Rollo recognised that Maxi was rapping about the faithless, the time when he felt a complete lack of faith in himself. And then we're stuck with the name 25 years later. But that we only ever got together to make one single, and we really enjoyed it very much, and it got signed by Island Records when it sat on a shelf for 6 months.
So where did you go from there? Did you get the record back, or you just carried on doing more stuff?
We did. We actually got the rights to the record back. It was in the contract. If they didn't release it after 6 months, we could get it back. And Rollo had this fledgling label, Cheeky Records, in companion with Champion Records, if you like, was the parent label. It's one of the last independent record labels in the UK. And it was a 50-50 deal with Cheeky and Champion. And we decided to self-release because the label was up and running, so why not? And Mel Medali, who ran Champion Records, who is a great star of our industry. He employed Paul Oakenfold back in the day. He was the first person to sign Will Smith in this country. Salt and Pepper, Push It was one of his massive hits, and Robin S. Show Me Love was a huge record on Champion Records. So without any funding from anywhere else, Mel always managed to sort of sniff out a hit and be, really on the ball with dance music. Anyway, so he agreed to let us release Faithless on Cheeky Records, and off we went.
And how was it in those first few sessions, those early days in the studio when you were making some of the early tunes? Were you buzzing off the excitement?
I think it was an amazing time because it was free of pressure in a way. It was very naive. We talked a lot about music, the things that we were all passionate about, parts of town we came from, which were all different. It wasn't like we were all school friends that had grown up together with that kind of agenda that you do when you've all grown up together and you form a band in your parents' garage. Or this was quite different. We'd all had, overlapping musical loves and experiences, and Faithless came to be, I guess, the sum of the parts.
And then your first single, Salva Mia, it was almost kind of trip hop, I suppose, at the time. And there's a part of your next single that starts off in kind of a slowish sort of way before these what have now become iconic chords come in. You know the ones I'm talking about.
I do know the ones. I do. So the first single was Salva Mia, and we decided to make an album because Maxi was such an interesting character and his lyrics were very thoughtful and poetic. And we wanted to make a record that was like a mixtape you'd give to a friend. So like with your favourite reggae tune on it, your favourite house tune, maybe something really chilled and ambient. There's even a bit of opera on there on our first album, Reverence. And we conceived it as an A-side and a B-side, a little bit more accessible. So it really came about as a way into the album.
Did the words for Insomnia come first, or did kind of like the music come first? How did it work with the pairing of the two?
The music came first. We created a backing track, and I wrote chords and I wrote riffs, and Rollo says, put some strings in. So I put strings in and we mucked about with the beat. And we called Maxi up, and at the time I was doing a lot of DJ gigs and my sleep patterns were all over the place, and I had chronic insomnia. He said, right, we're going to write a tune. It's called Insomnia because Blissy can't get no sleep. And bless Maxi, came down and he ran with it, and he, wrote about that very particular feeling you get late at night, that loneliness, that darkness. And he actually was thinking about a time when he had an abscess on his tooth, because he can sleep at the drop of a hat, which not many people know. He's an amazing sleeper, is Max. So, yeah. He wrote the lyrics from that perspective.
Where did you kind of pull those chords out of? Was it what you were being kind of influenced by at the time in terms of dance music tunes, or what?
Yeah, there's lots of things that influenced the making of Insomnia and that album. Some of it was a tribute to Detroit, to artists like Carl Craig and Derek May. And also we learnt to chop things up on the sampler as well. So the way that we chopped up little vocals and created a rhythm out of that was something that was a fairly new technology that we had a lot of fun with. And also the big sort of grand chords at the beginning were quite influenced by Donna Summer, I Feel Love, because there's a way that they change from major to minor, and it has this particular feeling in the chords. And for whatever reason, that was something that was in my mind and kind of worked with the music that I'd made that far, at that point. I mean, the track came together over time because we did different mixes of it. So the first mix was called the Moody Mix. And that was also influenced by Justin Robertson and Lion Rock, which is one of our favourite records. So the kind of rhythm of the bass line was a little bit referring to that slightly, more reggae-orientated house. We always love that kind of dubby vibe, something that always really influenced us. And also Maxi was a massive fan of reggae and dub, so it kind of spoke to him. So always wanted to make music that excited him in the studio as well, and that he could connect with. And then the Monster Mix was the one that I think became the more grand, epic mix, if you like, with the big strings at the front. So that actually came later.
It wasn't, well, it was kind of like, it was a top 25, it got to number 25, didn't it, on first release, and then kind of about a year later, it just went boom and smashed into the top 3 or whatever. How did that process happen?
It was very organic. People just didn't take it out of their record boxes, and it was just a record that started to connect, which always made me believe, if you like, in the long game, that hopefully the cream will rise to the top eventually. It also had champions within the dance music world. Pete Tong in particular campaigned for us to re-release it. He's like, this record is a hit, guys, I'm telling you. We'd already been to radio with it and told there was no hook in it and no chorus. And then they changed the personnel at Radio 1 and actually woke up to the fact that this is the music young people are listening to, this is what they're passionate about, and it became much more viable to be on daytime radio as well as specialist dance shows. And we had a hit in Europe, so we could import that success back. We had a lot of record companies who really supported us and that were bigger than Cheeky Records. So all the European labels we were signed to, licensed to abroad, were bigger and more powerful than Cheeky was. So it took a long time. But I mean, I think it's a great lesson in that. You know, things just don't necessarily come easy, and you have to be patient and, you know, have faith eventually.
And yeah, as Faithless, you started playing live not long after Insomnia came out. What made you want to start playing live as a dance act?
Well, all of these things moved forward because of failure, basically. The album wasn't selling at all. Reverence was selling 16 copies a week, which we were overjoyed at and very curious as to who it was that was actually buying these 16 copies every week. And really doing a show was about broadening the knowledge of the album. It wasn't just about Insomnia and Salvamere, which the dance community was starting to be aware of as quite significant records, but that there was a lot of music beyond that. So our radio pluggers were saying, look, we can't really get arrested at radio. Can you do a gig to kind of show the breadth of the album? You know, at that time, Dido was still in the live band, for example, and we did this mad gig, and there was quite a buzz about it in the Jazz Cafe. Like Paul Oakenfold and Sasha were outside, and we had to chuck their tickets out the window so they could get in. So there was a nice little buzz, but I mean, this is a 400-seater venue in London. It certainly hadn't translated across the world, but that was the key, putting together a live band. And our other record labels in Europe discovered we had a live band. Well, can you come and play in Germany? Your record is number 93 in the charts. And we were thinking, 93 doesn't sound so brilliant. No, you don't understand. It's, you know, this is a big market. And gradually the record picked up speed, both Insomnia and Salvamere, and we started doing these enormous gigs in Europe from only having done tiny gigs in London. So it was a real baptism of fire, and you know, we were really learning on the job. And we're also a really big band. I think we were 9 or 10 piece at that time. We slimmed down to 8 piece. But it was incredible. We didn't fit on half the stages that we were booked for back in the day.
I know. I remember seeing one of your early, must have been one of your earliest gigs, and it was at Tribal Gathering, I think, in Luton, and it was quite a small stage, really. It was like at the side of one of the dance tents or something, and you could only, all of you just fit on the stage. It wasn't much bigger than this stage, really. Yeah,
it was quite ridiculous, but then that was always the idea. Maxie was very clear. He didn't just want to go out with a DAT tape, as it was back in the day, with a DJ. He wanted the flexibility and the sort of breadth of sound and sonic experimentation you get with a live band. So we're like, yeah, fine, all right, let's do it like that. So not realising in one way of sort of creating a rod for our own back, in that it's expensive and the logistics are enormous, but it was all on a wing and a prayer, and we started to have a hit record so we could tour using the income from that. So it's quite an extraordinary position. We didn't have tour support from a label. It really was the most chaotic, mad period of time, but every time people found out we had a band in the different territories that we were signed to, whether it's Scandinavia, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Benelux, and so forth, Puerto Rico, we ended up doing it. Who knew that we had fans in Puerto Rico? But people would call and we would go. But it was an extraordinary time.
And then it wasn't long before you guys kind of became one of the big dance acts alongside the previous kind of big four, whatever, Prodigy, Orbital Underworld, and Chems, and nearly Fluke as well. I liked Fluke. I don't know.
Yes, we did some festivals in America with them. There was a period where electronic music was bubbling in America, but it hadn't broken into top 40 radio unless it was a very, very sort of commercial vocal house record.
Why haven't there been more big dance live acts, do you think?
Probably because, as I mentioned, the expense of doing it, the logistics there. I mean, there are certainly a lot now, but often it's like, there was 3 of us in the studio, making music and with multi-track facilities, And translating that into live performance was quite difficult. And now you've got the technology to be able to do that. A lot of people bill themselves as live, quote unquote, and it really is them and their laptop and maybe a Chaos pad. And it still can be really exciting and dynamic, but we produce electronic music in a studio on a Mac, or it was an Atari back then. And how do you get those sounds you made in the studio into the live arena and make it convincing? And as I say, it was accidental in a way. We even formed a live band. But eventually it became, one of our great strengths, because I think it gave something musically, a sort of dynamism you don't get from just playing a set off a laptop. It was very adaptable in that we played multi-platform festivals. Often we were just in the dance tent, but when people kind of heard what we did and saw the medium, which had, guitars, drums, backing singers, they could relate to it. They might not be dance music fans, but they understood, if you like, the medium of Faithless being a live band. They're like, you guys rock. It was like they didn't understand that dance music could be that potent and exciting, or they were just dismissive of it as a genre. So you'd get a lot of people like, I don't go to clubs, don't like dance music, but I like Faithless. And we could turn up that kind of punk energy, iconic frontman in Maxi, a really dynamic band. We'd have different singers on most tours, so it kind of kept the sound varied and interesting. And if things went wrong, we could have a jam. So that was something, when all the gear goes down, you've actually got some musicians there. We just used to set up a groove and, do a little jam until things had gone right, if they went wrong on the rare occasion they did.
And singles, tracks like We Come One and God Is a DJ really kind of came alive in the live setting for me. And was there a sense in which they were almost kind of like written to be performed live? Obviously you started creating them in the studio, but then you from doing live shows, it helped that they were being projected as songs that would really work well live?
Yes, it definitely became a thing in our minds, thinking, oh my God, this tune's going to be amazing when we put it in the context of our other songs. And that was always the way that, for me, going out and playing live is the most incredible experience. But I like to keep pushing things forward, and I always love to play new music. I didn't want to just tour without having a new album to promote. And I always loved the kind of story it told, weaving between the old songs and the new songs, and that kind of narrative thread, if you like, that ran through the set. Sonically, it's a lot of work because we are creating something completely different. We learned very early on that sometimes the little tricksy things you do in the studio are just lost in a live arena. I mean, literally an arena where the sound is booming round and you lose the detail. So we created quite different mixes and versions of our songs, which sometimes would throw the fans off when they want to sing along and something doesn't happen at the right time. But it also made it an experience. So you're coming to see Faithless, and it's not note for note, just like the record. It's a completely different experience, as befits that moment where you're only there for an hour and a half. It's not like you've got an album and you can listen to it over and over and over again and you can pick out the detail in your headphones. It's a sort of sonic and visual experience, and after a couple of hours you've gone home. So we learnt to kind of strip the set right down and change the arrangement sometimes, because it would lose people. Sometimes you'd feel it was a bit weak, and what we did in the studio that worked on record didn't actually work live. So it was all a kind of learning process, and you'd have to put on a different hat, if you like, to do the live set. But that's it's a great skill to have, and a privilege to play those songs and create these, if you like, remixes for people where they're experiencing something that they just won't get at home. It's not quite the same thing. It's a big thing for me to make sure that we're strong on every level, whether it's live, whether it's a DJ set, whether it's the album. I still, the records are really important. But when you live inside a song and you play it over and over again for years, you bring out different things and you almost think, I could do it this way. So again, that was another thing that was an education, which was making a record and living with it for a bit before we put it out into the world. So that was a useful experience.
We Come One, for instance, was really great, or is really sort of creating that unity vibe on the dance floor that you find at a great festival or in an amazing club or something. The broad people feeling the same kind of emotions at the same time and coming together as one in music. Was that kind of how did that tune particularly develop?
It was completely intentional in that we had experienced that feeling. You can call it universal consciousness, if you like, but we wanted to refer to that absolutely incredible feeling where we do become one. I mean, again, the beauty of Maxie's lyrics are alluding to the fact it's about war and peace as well. It's about the state of humankind. You can take it on a literal level of being at a gig and having that feeling that we're all dancing, to the same groove and being lifted by the DJ or the band. And we're in this beautiful communal moment that's transcendent. It's referring to that. But, there's a bit of a bigger message in it as well. But it was also because we had a bit of a flat period before where music had speeded up. It was all 136 or 130 BPM plus, and it all felt really speedy and rushy and busy. And we were trying to make a record that people would absolutely play in their DJ sets. We always had to start with the dance floor first, and then everything else would follow on from them. And so, yeah.
Another one of your big hits, God Is a DJ, rightly likened a great firing nightclub to some kind of church. But if God is a DJ, who's the producer?
That's a good one. We are. We are. Our community, we are the producers.
Who's your favourite ever DJ?
Oh, favourite ever DJ? That's a really good question. I think for me, in terms of just uncompromising genius and creating something that is beyond just a DJ set, I say Jeff Mills is one of my all-time heroes because he's just technically mind-blowing. He's not just DJing, he's like live playing a 909 drum machine and bringing something raw, elemental and so funky. I mean, sometimes it's just an assault of rhythm after rhythm after rhythm. There's barely any melody. But as a very exciting, visceral experience, I've properly lost the plot to Jeff Mills and been astounded with his technical ability. I just feel like I'm just an ingenue compared to him. It's a different skill set, if you like. From the whole turntablist culture. Again, I'm in awe of those guys.
Same.
And girls.
Of course, DJing in a club isn't really possible at the moment, nor playing to a packed arena. What do you think the government should be doing to support the music industry while the live events sector is predominantly shut down at the minute?
Well, they need to get a package of support together immediately, as soon as possible. I mean, it beggars belief that our industry is not recognised for its contribution economically, culturally, socially, spiritually.
Absolutely.
I can't believe that I can believe it actually, this particular government, don't get me started, but that a 1.57 billion arts package has been promised, but it doesn't include our industry, and so many people are not eligible. Many people are freelance and don't qualify for the self-employment subsidies that have come in and grants. Furlough also doesn't work if you're not actually in work. So there are lots of holes in this particular net, and people are close to destitution. And I don't say that casually. I feel very, very blessed and lucky myself. Because I've had a 30-year career, I've got some savings, and I also feel like I've had a good old go. If it all falls over and I never get to do another gig, it's absolutely heartbreaking. But the industry that surrounds it, the skill set that we're losing, this country has never really supported and trumpeted its cultural assets. The tourism, the number of people that come to various cities and clubs to experience the nightlife. It's a great diss on youth culture as well. It's yet another way in which the arts are not subsidised properly. People can get, grants from the Art Council on occasion, but our industry often miss out on this. And it's a huge employer. Something like 750,000 people are going to be made redundant in the next couple of months, especially as the furlough scheme winds down, those that were lucky enough to be furloughed. And I absolutely appreciate we all need to be able to be safe when we go out and gather together and do the things we love doing, but also recognising the sort of economic and personal cost of not having any government support scheme it's appalling. And to say our industry isn't viable, it disgusts me.
I was going to say, not only the music industry sat out the last few months trying to do our bit to help with the coronavirus crisis or whatever, and then to be told towards the end of the year that you're not viable, your whole industry is not viable. What you've been doing and building up your skill set and becoming these revered worldwide acts and this billion dollar industry is not viable. It's just insulting, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we all pay tax. Those tax coffers are going to be empty. I'm not working. I'm telling you, they've lost a lot of tax out of me that I would absolutely happily pay as a UK resident. It's so short-sighted. But as I say, from music being underinvested in schools, from schools upwards, it's seen like, music is some sort of sideshow. It's just entertainment. We'll be living in a very terrible world if the whole of the nightlife industry falls over, the festival industries. Orchestral players haven't played. It's a very precarious living being a musician, and particularly, in our field. Think about the years and years it takes to hone your craft. And I think, again, the government doesn't respect, or there's another agenda there with trying to, by the back door, dismantle our industry. And it is extremely short-sighted.
So what should our industry do to push back against this stipulation that we're not viable?
Well, I think, again, because so many are freelance, it's quite hard to speak with one voice, but it feels like the Nighttime Industries Association, rather, are trying very hard to advocate. We Make Events have also been pulling together people across social media, organising events, protests in Parliament. We have to write to our MPs, try and speak with one voice. If we can all advocate and pull together and be the family that we are, these are real people. I say it's an industry. The industry is made up of individuals who are passionate, long-time colleagues, people I've worked with for years and years, whether it's, the people that supply our microphones, the people that book our tours, our tour managers, production managers, promoters, venues. These are all, amazing people that need support. And if we can galvanise, there could be a U-turn. I don't see why not. The government have U-turned over pretty much everything else in this period of time, and absolutely draw importance to the, number one economic contribution this industry makes, and all the spin-off, the ecosystem around it. Whether it's your Uber drivers driving you to and from the gigs. Sorry, a fly just flew in my ear. Perhaps it was a politician reincarnated. So yes, speaking with one voice, if we can come one as an industry, then they can't divide and rule. And I think that's really important. And some of us are unionised, but not all of us are. And so these are places we can go and make our voices heard is through these bodies now. We Make Events and the Nighttime Industries Association. They are doing as much as they can to lobby government locally and nationally.
Yeah, things have got to change. Don't want to
make some noise. Make some effing noise, as we're fond of saying on the mic.
Absolutely. Don't want to make this too heavy, the whole conversation, but in light of all the horrendous testimonies that have come out recently of women raped or sexually harassed by Eric Murillo that have come to light since his death, what can be done to stamp out sexual harassment for the dance music scene and drain the swamp?
Wow, okay, that's a big question, because it's down to individual attitudes sometimes, which is sort of underpinned by, if you like, patriarchal system that allows that treatment of women to go unchallenged. And I guess the same with, trying to vouch for our industry to our governments. We have to vouch for our gender or call out when we feel that we're not being treated appropriately. And I guess the visibility of the Me Too movement is a positive step, in that people are now coming forward and talking about it. But until you redress the power balance right through the industry, until you get quite high-powered women within the music industry, it's sometimes going to go unchallenged. We need female promoters. as well as female DJs and female musicians, and at every sort of step of the way, because it is quite a male-dominated industry. And I think that's where, I think a lot of people have really changed their attitudes, and they've learnt what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and certain attitudes seem very old school and outdated. So again, if people are making some noise about it collectively and not being afraid to step forward and call people out on behaviour they find personally offensive, this is the way forward. Don't be scared to speak out. It feels like there's definitely more happening within our industry to create awareness about this, even having this conversation now. I mean, it's very sad that something as revolting and distressing as his behaviour has had to come to light in this way before we've had this conversation. But there have been other panels about, women in the music industry, the lack of diversity, festival billings, and as I say, in the upper echelons of the music industry, the A&R culture, which was very laddie, very boozy, very football-y. There's lots of conversations that exclude women in the music business. And the more of us there are around, then the more that kind of gets diluted, and we can change the agenda and make it inclusive and diverse, because that is really what our nightlife industry is about. Should be a safe place for people to come together, express themselves regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender, and so on. And that might make me sound extremely right on, but that is my experience of the world that I have, found my passion, my spirit, my career in, for sure.
Excellent.
Tolerance.
Maxi was always the front man in terms of vocalists for Faithless, but over the years you've kind of worked, as you alluded to, with various other vocalists, haven't you? Like LSK, Dido, who's Rollo's sister, who ended up having quite a big career of her own, I seem to recall. Zoe Johnston, Dougie from Temper Trap, Cat Power, and on this new album you've got a few featured other vocalists as well, haven't you?
Yes, we do. The new album's called All Blessed. Shameless plug time. It's coming out on October the 23rd, and I do feel incredibly blessed to be able to still be making music and to work with such thoughtful, intelligent artists and bring something quite fresh to the table. Maxi's off doing his own projects, so we've worked with other artists on this. We have returned to some favourite collaborators. Like LSK is also on this album, and some legends like Jazzy B from Soul to Soul, which was an amazing experience to meet him.
What's Jazzy doing?
What does Jazzy do? He just is Jazzy B. He just walks in and he opens his mouth, and I'm in the presence of a legend, someone who's changed the face of British music globally. And it was almost too exciting. I mean, they say never meet your heroes, don't they? But he was absolutely delightful and fascinating as well, because he comes from sound system culture. So we talked a lot about his world. I mean, that's often how we come about songwriting, is we talk about someone's attitude and what they think of as artistry and where they come from, where they're at. It's how we met Maxi. It's how we got discussing his religious beliefs, and then decided to turn that into a kind of, a lyrical agenda for our first album, and then it suddenly became our lyrical agenda for the next 25 years. So we feel like Maxi set the bar very high with that, and we've worked with people on this new album who I would definitely say more in that poetic vein, and spoken word artists. They're not sort of out and out rappers, really talented individuals called Sully Breaks, another guy called Caleb Femi, who's a poet laureate for young people. And they have beautiful voices, they have something to say, and it felt absolutely what the Faithless flag should be flying for. Empathy, tolerance, creating a platform for people that should be heard in the world. So
Geica's on it as well, and they're quite,
Geica as well.
Different artists in a way, but is there a kind of thread that ties them together, do you think?
I guess the thread is they're Black British artists, and they have a voice and a very, very interesting thoughts on the world, and they're very soulful people. When we sat down to talk about their lives and their worlds, it was just fascinating. It was just fascinating. Sometimes we just run the tape machine, the laptop, just recording our conversations, because from those little nuggets can come the idea for a song and what we want to say lyrically, and a persona that they might want to adopt within the music. So, I feel like they're the voice of the future. And I love that idea of Faithless being, somewhat of the past, if you like, but also of the future. That's important to me, because I feel dance music is the genre where, and electronica generally, is where we push things forward.
That's interesting about sitting down and having discussions and sort of songs coming out of that as well, because it's not just, can you write us some words for that track or whatever. It's more collaborative. Absolutely.
And maybe that's the corner that we occupy in dance music has always had that collaborative element, but has also tried to go perhaps a little bit beyond the kind of throw your hands in the air vernacular of dance music, which is party music and escapist, and it's the place where we go to forget our troubles. But I do feel, and the feelings that I've had and certain tracks that have touched my life and touched my mind and my soul have had something to say, and we try and create music that is moving and emotional, and words that have meaning and will touch you in some way. And it blows my mind when people are fans, people across the world write to us on social media and tell us about how our music has affected them, or the lyrics to a particular song. It's the most incredible thing as an artist to feel that your music has touched people's lives, and it makes all the hard times. And I'm telling you, there are, even in a successful band, there are moments of deep despair and feeling like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. And those are the moments that make it all absolutely worth it. When someone says you have touched their life with your music, what an honour, what a privilege.
Why have you called the album All Blessed then?
Well, it's quite an ambivalent title. It should have a question mark after it. We are all blessed compared to a lot of people in the world. It's talking from a very Western perspective here. But it is ambivalent, because we are in a very critical point for humanity, very polarised. We're in the middle of a climate eco-disaster. What kind of future are we creating for ourselves? And we're trying to address that a little bit on the album, in a personal and intimate way, rather than a sort of tub-thumping political way, but where humanity is, where we are in ourselves and the wider world around us. Like every Faithless album, we try and go on that journey, kind of intimate, internal, introspective, and what it means in the bigger world. So yeah, All Blessed is that we are counting our blessings on the one hand, and on the other hand, wondering if we are all blessed or are we all cursed.
Hopefully the former.
The former, hopefully.
Blissy, thanks very much for coming in to talk at BMC today, and all the best for the future and with the album and everything else.
Thank you very much, Carl, and I really hope more for our industry, that we can get back on our feet safely. It's imperative for us all. We love this scene.
Absolutely.